The classroom is not a ring. There is a number that tells you something important about what is happening in American classrooms right now. In the 2023 to 2024 school year, Indiana's Department of Education released its first ever report on how often school employees are physically injured on the job by students. The number for that one state. In that 1 year, 3,032 documented incidents. 485 of those incidents were serious enough that the employee had to miss work because of the injury. That is one state, 1 year. And Indiana is not an outlier. A 2022 study conducted by the American Psychological Association, which surveyed nearly 12,000 educators nationwide, found that 56% of teachers reported incidents of physical violence committed by students following the pandemic, a 26% increase compared to before it. Teachers are being hurt at school in numbers that almost no one outside the profession is fully aware of. And when that violence escalates beyond what a school office can contain, when it reaches a level where law enforcement becomes involved and the justice system has to answer the question of what happens to the person who did it, the answers in today's 4 cases are each different, and each one says something specific about where the line between a school problem and a criminal problem actually sits. Today's 4 cases come from 4 states, cover 4 completely different types of attack, and have 4 different paths through the justice system. A 17-year-old in North Carolina who slapped a female teacher twice in front of her own classroom, knocked her glasses off her face, told her nobody was coming, and threatened to kill her, and then 2 weeks later was indicted by a grand jury on charges including second-degree kidnapping, tried as an adult, and is still working through the Forsyth County court system. A 4'10" mother in Syracuse, New York, who pulled a hoodie over her face to impersonate a student, bypassed school security, walked into her daughter's teacher's classroom in front of 25 to 30 children at 7:30 in the morning and punched the teacher repeatedly in the face, breaking her nose, and who is now serving 2 years in a New York state prison. 2 19-year-old enrolled students in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, who verbally announced their intention to attack a substitute teacher and then, in a coordinated pattern that the police department described specifically as a synchronized physical attack, punched him in the face until he was on the ground curled in a fetal position covering his head while a crowd of other students recorded it, and who are now charged as adults facing criminal proceedings in Broward County. And a 16-year-old student in Las Vegas who came to his English teacher's classroom after the bell, allegedly to talk about his grades, strangled her from behind with a cord until she lost consciousness, and then beat, kicked, and cut her, and who is now in a Nevada state prison serving 16 to 40 years after pleading guilty to attempted murder. The common thread in all 4 cases is not the type of attack. The attacks are different in method, severity, perpetrator, and motive. The common thread is what happened when law enforcement stepped in and the courts were asked to treat the conduct as something other than a school discipline matter. In each of these 4 cases, what started in a school building ultimately ended in a courtroom. And what those courtrooms decided, from an ongoing kidnapping case in Superior Court to 2 years in a New York prison to an adult felony battery charge in Florida to 16 to 40 years in Nevada, is a story that today's episode tells. Every detail in today's episode comes from law enforcement press conferences, charging documents, court records, and verified journalism from the outlets that covered each case from the moment of the incident through the most recent available court proceeding. Where cases are still pending, that status is clearly identified. Before we get into the first case, I want you to notice one thing as you listen to each situation today. In every one of these 4 cases, there is a moment where the school handled it first or did not handle it, and then law enforcement stepped in with a different set of tools. Track that handoff point in each case. And tell me in the comments, what do you think is the right boundary between school discipline and criminal prosecution when a student or parent physically assaults someone in a school building? Ain't nobody coming. Parkland High School, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, April 15th, 2024 case ongoing. Monday, April 15th, 2024. Parkland High School, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Forsyth County, in the Piedmont Triad region of the state. A female teacher is seated at her desk in her classroom. The school day is in session. Aquavis Hickman, 17 years old, is a student at the school. What the body of verified reporting on this case establishes is that at approximately 2:10 in the afternoon, Hickman approaches the teacher's desk and begins profanity-laced verbal confrontation. Then he slaps her in the face. He steps back. He looks at her. She asks, calmly, seated, Not rising. Do you think that affected me in any way? Hickman says, "Want me to hit you again?" She says, "I don't want it." He hits her again. The second impact is hard enough that her glasses fly off her face. He walks to the back of the room. He says, in a sing-song voice, "Ain't nobody coming. You just got slapped. Go back to teaching." A student in the classroom recorded approximately 38 seconds of the interaction on a cell phone. The clip begins after the first slap and captures the second one in full, including the exchange of words, the glasses coming off the teacher's face, and Hickman's departure to the back of the room. The footage circulated on social media within hours. By the following morning, it was national news. The teacher came to work the next day. She declined medical treatment at the scene. She sat at her desk through the entire recorded incident without rising. The prior incident nobody reported. What the subsequent investigation revealed was that April 15th was not the first time. On February 1st, 2024, 2.5 months before the classroom video, Hickman had been involved in a separate incident at the same school involving a male teacher. The district attorney's office later confirmed that Hickman had not acted alone in the February incident. According to the indictment that followed, Hickman and at least 2 other students had gathered in the school's bus parking lot, created a public disturbance, and kidnapped a male teacher, the legal description reflecting that they surrounded and confined him without his consent in a manner that created a clear and present danger of injury. They attempted to fight the male teacher. He was not physically injured. A school resource officer, a Forsyth County Sheriff's deputy assigned to Parkland High, responded to the February 1st incident. No criminal charges were filed against Hickman at that point. He remained enrolled at the school. 7 to 4 days later, he was at the female teacher's desk. A former substitute teacher named Larry Edwards, who had spent 4 decades teaching at Parkland High School before the 2024 incident, came forward publicly after the April 15 video went viral to report that Hickman had also assaulted him. Edwards said he had walked to his desk to get his phone to call the office, and that Hickman had mockingly walked behind him, put his hand on Edwards' head and smashed it, while the students laughed. Hickman then ran out of the room. Edwards said he did not pursue the matter. "I was appalled," Edwards said. He said the students started laughing and Hickman ran out. The grand jury and the kidnapping charge. 2 weeks after the April 15 video began circulating, on April 29, 2024, a Forsyth County grand jury convened and returned 2 bills of indictment against Hickman. The Forsyth County District Attorney, Jim O'Neill, announced the charges at a press conference alongside Forsyth County Sheriff Bobby Kimbrough and Winston-Salem Police Chief William Penn. The charges were not misdemeanor assault. They were felony second-degree kidnapping, assault on a government official, and communicating threats in connection with the April 15th incident. Additionally, Hickman was indicted on a second kidnapping charge and a misdemeanor count of riot in connection with the February 1st incident. O'Neill confirmed Hickman would be charged as an adult. The kidnapping charge requires explanation because it is a charge that turns what many people initially process as a classroom assault into something with a different legal name. Under North Carolina law, second-degree kidnapping applies when a person unlawfully confines or restrains another person without consent for the purpose of terrorizing them. The district attorney's office stated explicitly that the charge applied to Hickman's conduct in the April 15th incident because he unlawfully confined and restrained the female teacher, preventing her from leaving, surrounding her at her desk, and making the threat to kill her for the purpose of terrorizing her. The threat was made in a manner and under circumstances which would cause a reasonable person to believe that threat was likely to be carried out, O'Neill said, and the person threatened believed it would, in fact, be carried out. The teacher stayed in her chair and did not move. She was not free to move. That is what the kidnapping charge describes. At the press conference, O'Neill delivered a statement that was widely quoted. "Our message to our community is simple. We stand with the teachers. We will fight to protect those teachers. And if you lay a hand on a teacher and assault a teacher, you can expect that the punishment will be swift and severe. Promise made. Promise kept." Sheriff Kimbrough said he saw teachers breaking up fights every day he visited schools. He said deputies were having to use pepper spray on children. He said he was not happy about it, but had to balance whether to sacrifice the many for the few. Chief Penn said, "Our schools aren't a battleground or a boxing ring. Our schools must be sacred." The ongoing case. Hickman posted a $20,000 bond and was released. A Forsyth Superior Court judge ruled in July 2024 that transferring the case to adult court did not violate his constitutional rights. Prosecutors offered a plea deal in August 2024 under which, if Hickman pleaded guilty to all 5 charges, they would be consolidated into a single Class E felony, which carries a maximum sentence of approximately 7 years in North Carolina and could result in probation at a judge's discretion. Hickman's attorney Andrew Keever, speaking to the Winston-Salem Journal, said his client had made significant positive changes in his life since the slapping incident and that the case would be discussed. The offer was not immediately accepted. By late 2025 and into early 2026, Hickman's case was still moving through the Forsyth County court system, with multiple hearings, continued dates, and a motion by his defense attorney seeking again to have the case dismissed or returned to juvenile court. Court records from early 2026 also show Hickman facing a separate and unrelated set of charges: possession of a gun with an altered serial number, carrying a concealed weapon, and resisting a public officer. Those charges arose from an incident in Winston-Salem in 2025 and are being handled in a separate proceeding. His next scheduled appearance in the teacher assault case as of the time this episode was recorded was in Forsyth Superior Court. The teacher whose glasses flew off her face on April 15th reported to work the next day. She never left her chair during the 38 seconds. Hickman said ain't nobody coming. The district attorney's office, the sheriff, and the police chief all showed up 2 weeks later at a podium and said he was wrong about that. Aquavius Hickman had 2 prior incidents at the same school before the viral video, one in February involving a male teacher and at least one incident involving a substitute teacher who came forward after the fact. A school resource officer responded to the February incident. No criminal charges were filed. 7 to 4 days later, he was at a female teacher's desk. How should the existence of those prior incidents documented at the school level affect the school district's legal and moral exposure in this case? And what do you think should happen to Hickman, given that he is currently also facing weapons charges? Tell me in the comments. April 15th, 2024. A classroom. A seated teacher. 38 seconds. 2 slaps. Glasses knocked off her face. Ain't nobody coming. You just got slapped? Go back to teaching. A grand jury convened 2 weeks later. Second-degree kidnapping. Assault on a government official. Communicating threats. Tried as an adult. Forsyth County Superior Court. 2 prior incidents at the same school that did not produce criminal charges before this one did. The teacher came to work the next day. The district attorney, the sheriff, and the police chief stood at a podium together and said, if you lay a hand on a teacher, you can expect swift and severe punishment. Promise made. Promise kept. The case is still working through the court system. Hickman is facing separate weapons charges. He said ain't nobody coming. 3 agencies showed up. My mother will take care of this. Lincoln Middle School, Syracuse, New York, February 16th, 2024. Sentence March 24th, 2025. Thursday, February 15th, 2024. Lincoln Middle School, Syracuse, New York. A teacher whose name is later revealed publicly at sentencing as Megan Reno catches a student who is a daughter of Lindsay Sutton, lying about her whereabouts during the school day. Reno calls security and reports it through the appropriate school channel. The student, before the day ends, says to people of the school, my mother will take care of this. Reno reports the threat to administration before she goes home. The following morning is Friday, February 16th, 2024, the last school day before the February break. Reno arrives at Lincoln Middle School, excited for a fun Friday before the parade, as she will later describe it in court. She does not know that Lindsay Sutton, 31 years old, 4 feet and 10 inches tall, is already in the building. Sutton had arrived at the school during arrival time, the period when students are flowing through the single point of entry and the doors are constantly opening and closing. She pulled the hood of her sweatshirt up over her head. She walked past the security personnel at the entrance as they were focused on the incoming stream of students. The school superintendent, Anthony Davis, later confirmed that the door was not propped open. It was arrival time. The doors were actively in use, and Sutton used the flow of arriving students as cover. She was not signed in. She did not get a visitor's badge. She did not go through any identification process. She went directly to Megan Reno's classroom. She found it. The school principal arrived at the classroom door and found Sutton already inside. The principal began trying to de-escalate. That is when Sutton began punching the teacher who had never seen her. Megan Reno, speaking at Lynn Zena Sutton's sentencing hearing on March 24, 2025, told the court the following: "I arrived at Lincoln Middle School excited for a fun Friday before the parade. However, my day took a devastating turn when Lynn Zena Sutton, a woman I have never seen or spoken to before, entered my classroom and physically assaulted me in front of my students. My classroom, which is supposed to be a safe space for myself and my students, was violated in that moment." Reno had never spoken to Sutton before that morning. She had not had any prior contact with her. She had reported the student dishonesty through the appropriate school channel, which is what teachers are trained and expected to do. She had even reported the subsequent threat to administration before she left the building the day before. She arrived the next morning and was punched in the face repeatedly by a woman she had never met, in front of 25 to 30 of her students, while the principal watched from the doorway and attempted to intervene. The assault gave Reno a concussion, a nasal bone fracture, a maxillary spine fracture at the base of her nose. She was transported to the hospital. She did not return to Lincoln Middle School for the rest of the school year. When she returned to teaching, it was in a different district. She still attends doctor's appointments for her injuries. This is the outcome that followed from a teacher doing her job correctly. The arrest and the 14 charges. Sutton was not arrested immediately at the school. She departed the building after the assault and was not in custody until later that Friday afternoon. The Onondaga County District Attorney, Bill Fitzpatrick, confirmed that Sutton had been motivated by a report the teacher made regarding Sutton's child, and that the student's warning, "My mother will take care of this," had been followed through. Fitzpatrick called the incident alarming, specifically addressing the fact that Sutton had been able to enter the school and leave without being immediately apprehended. "I don't know what happened here," he said publicly. "I hope it never happens again." Sutton was initially charged with second-degree assault and burglary. Burglary, in New York law, encompasses unlawful entry into a building for the purpose of committing a crime, and Sutton's entry into Lincoln Middle School without authorization for the purpose of assaulting Reno qualified under that statute. In May 2024, a grand jury returned a 14-count indictment against Sutton. The primary charge was assault in the second degree, a felony. The new charges added by the grand jury were harassment, because a second teacher present in the room at the time of the attack reported that Sutton had also verbally threatened her, and 11 counts of endangering the welfare of a child. There were 11 children in the classroom during the attack. The child endangerment count applied once for each of them. Each count carried up to 7 years of exposure at the felony level. Senior Assistant District Attorney Cynthia Newton, prosecuting the case, said in a statement, "School is supposed to be a safe place for the children who attend and also for the people who work at that school. And an incident such as this is going to be taken very seriously and certainly has a potential to concern amongst the community as a whole, amongst parents who send their children to school every day, and amongst teachers and administrators." The plea and the sentence. Lynn Zena Sutton appeared in Onondaga County Court on January 27, 2025, and pleaded guilty to assault in the second degree. The 14 original charges, including the burglary count, the harassment count, and the 11 child endangerment counts, were to be dismissed as part of the plea agreement. In exchange for the guilty plea, prosecutors had agreed to recommend a sentence of 2 years in state prison followed by 2 years of post-release supervision. At the sentencing on March 24, 2025, Megan Reno addressed the court. She described the impact of the assault on her physical and emotional health. She described having to leave the school and the district she had worked in. She described still attending medical appointments. She said her classroom was violated. She said it had affected her life physically, emotionally, and mentally. Judge Gordon Cuffey, presiding over the sentencing, acknowledged Sutton's express remorse conveyed through her attorney, Heather Vincent, who said Sutton had accepted responsibility and would suffer the hardship of being separated from her 4 children. The judge said Sutton had modeled violent behavior to her children. He imposed the agreed-upon sentence, 2 years in state prison, followed by 2 years of post-release supervision. Sutton's grandmother, Roxanne Tompkins, had spoken to reporters in the days after the initial attack and offered context from the family's perspective. The anger stemmed from what the family described as unresolved bullying that Sutton's daughter had been experiencing at the school. She said her granddaughter had been slapped, kicked, had her glasses broken 3 times and her phone broken twice, and all they got from the school was a suggestion that the daughter was a problem. The judge heard that context and still imposed 2 years in prison. Reno heard that context and still had a broken nose and was working in a different district. The children who were in that classroom heard their teacher scream and watched from their desks. The school principal arrived at the doorway and tried to de-escalate after the punching had already started. The student warned the school the day before. She said, "My mother will take care of this." Reno reported it to administration. Administration was made aware. When Sutton arrived the next morning and bypassed security, the principal was at the classroom door before the assault ended. The teacher had reported through proper channels. The threat had been reported. The attack happened anyway. Who bears responsibility for the conditions that allowed Sutton to enter that school and reach that classroom? The district attorney noted that it was alarming that she was able to enter and leave. Where should security protocols draw the line between access during student arrival and the vulnerability that access creates? Tell me in the comments. February 16th, 2024. A teacher who had never met her attacker. A child who said, "My mother will take care of this." A woman in a hoodie who walked in during arrival time. A principal who arrived at the classroom door and tried to de-escalate while the punching was already happening. 25 to 30 children in the seats. A concussion. A broken nose. 2 bone fractures. 14 charges. A grand jury. 2 years in state prison. 2 years of post-release supervision. Megan Reno said her classroom was supposed to be a safe space. She took medical leave for the rest of the school year. She returned to teaching in a different district. She still goes to doctor's appointments. Sutton's lawyer said she would suffer hardship being separated from her 4 children. The judge said she had modeled violent behavior to them. He sentenced her anyway. The synchronized attack. Dillard High School, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, March 13th, 2025, charges pending. Thursday afternoon, March 13th, 2025, approximately 2 o'clock. Dillard High School in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Broward County. A substitute teacher is in the school performing his duties for the day. Javis L. McClover, 19 years old, and Roderick McQueen, also 19 years old, both of them enrolled students at Dillard High, approached the substitute teacher. They verbally threatened to attack him, and then they do. The Fort Lauderdale Police Department's official description of what followed is specific and clinical. They intentionally launched a synchronized physical attack. They repeatedly punched the teacher in the face and head with closed fists. He fell to the ground. They continued punching him after he was on the ground, in a fetal position, attempting to guard himself against injury. School security staff arrived and pulled the 2 students away from the teacher. The teacher suffered facial swelling, bruising, and back pain. He was recovering at home. The cell phone footage that circulated beginning that evening and continued spreading over the following week showed a large crowd of students surrounding the fight area while security staff struggled to separate the attackers from the teacher on the ground. The footage shows McClover straddling the teacher as he continued to strike him. It shows the security staff's intervention and the gradually expanding circle of students who had gathered to watch. Multiple students were interviewed by local television reporters in the days that followed. 5 of them, in the footage broadcast by WSVN and WPLG, either smiled or laughed while describing what had happened. Some said the teacher had said something to provoke the 2 attackers. A witness told NBC6 South Florida that the teacher had a history of saying challenging things to students, and that on that day the teacher had said something to the pair before they approached him. The witness cited what the teacher said as provoking the confrontation. The charges and the bond hearing. Both McClover and McQueen were arrested within the same day as the attack, identified by law enforcement with the assistance of school administration. Both were charged with battery on a public or private education employee. In Florida, this charge derives from Florida Statute 784.081, which elevates what would ordinarily be a first-degree misdemeanor battery to a third-degree felony when the victim is a school employee engaged in their official duties. A third-degree felony in Florida carries a maximum sentence of 5 years in state prison. Because McClover and McQueen were both 19 years old at the time of the attack, they were not juveniles. They are legal adults enrolled in a high school and are being prosecuted as adults, a description that technically applies automatically, not by prosecutorial choice, because they are adults. McClover appeared in bond court, and a judge set his bond at $15,000. When McClover's defense attorney asked the judge to reduce the bond, Citing McClover's academic progress and his mother's financial limitations, the judge responded with a statement that circulated as widely as the footage itself. The judge said, "Counsel, he and another individual, without any provocation, walked up and started punching a teacher in the face, beating him. He's a danger to the community. $15,000 bond. Have a good day." McQueen's bond was set at $3,000 with electronic monitoring and in order to stay away from Dillard High School. Both men were ordered to have no contact with the victim. The substitute teacher, who has not been publicly identified by name in the verified reporting on this case, was described by police as recovering at home following the attack. No additional details about his long-term condition have been publicly released. The Fort Lauderdale Police Department confirmed the investigation was continuing and that prosecutors would determine the final trajectory of the criminal proceedings. The context at Dillard. Parents who spoke to reporters in the days after the March 13th attack said fighting was not uncommon at Dillard High School and that they hoped something would be done. One parent, Erica Pouncey, said, "I cannot believe that. I'm totally shocked." Another parent, Feline Alexander, said she was scared for her own daughter but expressed confidence in the school's principal. What the arrest footage and the bond hearing language established publicly was that from a law enforcement perspective, there was no ambiguity about the nature of what occurred. A verbal threat was made before the physical attack. The attack was coordinated between two individuals. It continued after the victim was on the ground. And the framing of the official arrest report, synchronized physical attack, communicated that the department was treating this as a planned and deliberate assault, rather than an impulsive confrontation. The national conversation that followed the video circulation touched on a statistic that became relevant to the Fort Lauderdale case specifically, between the American Psychological Association's 2022 data showing a 26% increase in student physical violence against teachers since the pandemic, and school districts across the country reporting sharply elevated incidents of staff assaults. The Dillard attack landed in a news cycle where the numbers had already established the context. Substitute teachers are, in particular, a category of educator who advocates for school safety net are often more vulnerable to these incidents than permanent staff. They have less established relationships with students, less familiarity with individual students' histories, and less institutional standing within the school environment. The two 19-year-old men who planned and executed a coordinated assault on a substitute teacher at Dillard High School on March 13, 2025, had apparently calculated that the context of that substitute teacher standing in the school gave them some degree of permission. The judge at the bond hearing said they were wrong. The charge in the Broward County court system says they are wrong. Whether the criminal proceedings ultimately produce the outcome the charge allows is a question the case has not yet answered. Two 19-year-olds verbally announced their intention to attack a teacher and then carried out a coordinated assault on camera in front of dozens of students. 5 students interviewed afterwards smiled or laughed. Some said the teacher provoked it. The judge at the bond hearing said there was no provocation and called McClover a danger to the community. Florida Statute 784.081 elevates battery on a school employee to a felony specifically to protect educators. Do you think the threat of a felony charge is a sufficient deterrent in a school environment where 5 witnesses smile or laugh when describing what they watched? Tell me in the comments. March 13th, 2025, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Dillard High School. A verbal threat made before the first punch. A synchronized physical attack. Repeated closed fist blows to a teacher's face and head. A man on the ground in a fetal position with people continuing to hit him. Security pulling them off. Facial swelling and bruising and back pain. Both arrested the same day. Battery on a school employee, a 3rd-degree felony. Bond hearing. He's a danger to the community. $15,000. Have a good day. 5 students smiled when describing it to reporters. Some said the teacher provoked it. The case is in the Broward County court system. The substitute teacher was at home recovering. He had not been publicly named. The 2 men who planned a coordinated assault on him in front of a crowd are adults. She was less than 2 years out of college. El Dorado High School, Las Vegas, Nevada, April 7, 2022. Sentenced June 28, 2023. Thursday, April 7, 2022. After school hours. El Dorado High School in East Las Vegas, Nevada, Clark County School District, a large public high school serving about 2,000 students in a dense residential area of the city. a first-year English teacher identified in later court proceedings and civil litigation under the pseudonym Sade Doe, is in her classroom during office hours, the after-school period when students can return to speak with teachers about their coursework. She had been a teacher for less than 2 years. This was her first job after graduating from college in Washington State. She had moved to Las Vegas specifically because she wanted to teach somewhere sunny. She was assigned about 200 sophomore and junior students, 40 per class period. Jonathan Eleuterio Martinez Garcia was in her fourth period English class. He was 16 years old. He came to her classroom that afternoon, by the account of the investigation and his subsequent guilty plea, to talk about his grades. She unlocked the classroom door to let him inside. He followed her to her desk, and then he strangled her from behind with a cord. Martinez Garcia strangled the teacher until she lost consciousness. He then beat her. He kicked her. He stomped her. He cut her. He also committed acts that produced a charge of attempted sexual assault. By the time another school employee found her in her classroom, her injuries were severe and she required hospitalization. She was stable when she was found. She was 20-something years old. She had been teaching for less than 2 years. She wanted to live somewhere sunny. Her students came in and found an unlocked classroom door. The arrest and the charges. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department arrested Jonathan Eleuterio Martinez Garcia on the same day as the attack. Because of the severity of the charges, attempted murder, attempted sexual assault, and battery with the use of a deadly weapon resulting in substantial bodily harm, he was automatically charged as an adult under Nevada law, which provides for automatic transfer to adult court for defendants 16 and 17 years old facing charges of this gravity. He did not have to be certified as an adult through a separate process. The charges themselves carried him there. Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak, speaking publicly about the attack within days of the incident, called it an absolutely tragic and horrendous situation and said, "We must ensure our educators remain safe as they do the important work of teaching our kids. Their safety and well-being is a primary concern." Clark County School District Superintendent Jesus Jora said violent acts, assaults, and bullying would not be tolerated and that those who chose to engage in them would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The school district subsequently invested tens of millions of dollars in new security measures across the district, including badge-style panic buttons, single points of entry onto campuses, fencing, and upgraded surveillance cameras. El Dorado High School alone received approximately $26 million in new security infrastructure. The teacher was not included in that budget. The guilty plea. Jonathan Martinez Garcia pleaded guilty in April 2023, nearly 1 year after the attack, to attempted murder, attempted sexual assault, and battery with use of a deadly weapon resulting in substantial bodily harm. All 3 counts. The plea was entered in Clark County District Court. No trial was held. The guilty plea to attempted murder is the most significant charge in the sequence because it establishes, in the legal record, that what occurred in that classroom on April 7, 2022, the strangulation until unconsciousness, the beating, the kicking, the stomping, the cutting, constituted an attempt to end the life of the person in that room. Garcia was 16 when it happened. He was 17 by the time he pleaded guilty. The sentencing. On June 28, 2023, Judge Kathleen Delaney of the Clark County District Court sentenced Jonathan Eleuterio Martinez Garcia to 16 to 40 years in the Nevada Department of Corrections. He was 17 years old at sentencing. The teacher, identified at the sentencing hearing under the pseudonym Sade Doe, appeared and spoke. The account of what she said at the sentencing was reported by outlets covering the hearing. She described what had been taken from her, the ability to teach in the classroom where it happened, the physical pain that remained chronic in her body, the PTSD that followed her, the walkers she had come to rely on, the sensitivity to light and sound that the brain injury had produced. She had applied for teaching jobs in Arizona and Nevada because she wanted to live somewhere sunny. She accepted a position at a school she interviewed for by phone. She went to school 4 days a week for 2 years before a student came in to talk about his grades and strangled her. Nevada Department of Corrections records confirm that Martinez Garcia is currently incarcerated at Lovelock Correctional Center, an adult facility in rural northern Nevada. He is serving the 16 to 40-year sentence. The minimum release eligibility, accounting for time served since his arrest in April 2022, is approximately his mid to late 20s. The maximum runs to his mid-50s. What happens within that range is a matter for the Nevada Parole Board and the ongoing criminal justice process. What the teacher did after. In April 2024, 2 years after the attack, the teacher filed a civil lawsuit against the Clark County School District in Clark County District Court, naming the district, former Superintendent Jora, and El Dorado Principal Christina Brockett as defendants. The lawsuit alleged that the district knew about violence at El Dorado and elsewhere in the district well before the April 7th attack, that the teacher was never informed of any safety or security concerns at the school, that she never received any formal training relating to teacher safety against violent acts by students, and that the school had not followed its own policies requiring students to leave the building after school and return through the main entrance to obtain a hall pass if they wanted to access teachers during office hours. The lawsuit said that Garcia had a conference with a school counselor scheduled just 2 weeks before the attack to discuss his academic progress and behavior concerns, a conference that his family did not attend. The teacher did not know about that conference. She did not know about whatever was in Garcia's school record that produced a counselor's meeting request 2 weeks before he came to her classroom. She unlocked the door because a student wanted to talk about his grades. That is what teachers do during office hours. She is in her late 20s now. She uses a walker. She has sensitivity to light and sound. She teaches in a different district if she teaches at all. The lawsuit is proceeding. The school district has declined to comment on pending litigation. Garcia had a counselor conference scheduled for behavior concerns 2 weeks before the attack. His family did not show up. The teacher was not told. The district's own policy required students to re-enter through the main entrance with a hall pass after the bell, a policy that was not followed. She had no formal safety training. She unlocked the door during office hours, which is what teachers are supposed to do. Who, in that chain of events, holds responsibility beyond the 16-year-old who committed the attack? And what do you think the $26 million security upgrade at El Dorado High School should have meant for the person who was inside the classroom when there was no system to protect her? Tell me in the comments. April 7, 2022. Office hours. An unlocked classroom door. 16 years old. A cord. Strangulation until unconsciousness. Beating. Kicking. Stomping. Cutting. Attempted sexual assault. A teacher less than 2 years out of college who wanted to live somewhere sunny. She was found by another employee. She was stable when they found her. Garcia was arrested the same day. Charged as an adult automatically. Pleaded guilty to attempted murder. Sentenced June 28, 2023 to 16 to 40 years. She filed a civil lawsuit in April 2024. She uses a walker. She has PTSD. She has sensitivity to light and sound. The school received $26 million in new security. The conference with the school counselor scheduled for Garcia behavior concerns 2 weeks before the attack, the one his family did not attend. She was not told about. She unlocked the door during office hours. That is what teachers do. The line that should not require a court to draw. 4 cases. 4 teachers. 4 perpetrators who made a calculation, conscious or not, that what they were about to do was something they could do. That the classroom was a space where this was possible. That the teacher at the desk was someone they could hit. That no one was coming. That the substitute who said the wrong thing was someone they could coordinate a beating against. That the mother's anger at a report card incident gave her a right of entry and a right of violence. That the student staying after school had access to a person who could not stop him. In every one of today's 4 cases, the perpetrator was wrong about the absence of consequences. But in 3 of the 4 cases, those consequences took months or years to fully materialize, and in 1 case they have not yet been fully determined. The numbers that frame these 4 stories are worth naming. 56% of American teachers reported physical violence from students in the post-pandemic period, up 26% from before. 3,032 documented incidents of physical injury to school employees in Indiana alone in a single year. Tens of millions of dollars in security upgrades in Clark County, Nevada, installed after a teacher was beaten nearly to death in her own classroom. A state law that will take effect in North Carolina allowing juvenile offenders facing serious felonies to be prosecuted as adults passed, in part, in the context of the very types of incidents this episode covers. These are not isolated events being treated as anomalies. They are a documented pattern, and the 4 cases today are 4 of the points on that pattern. What the police departments, prosecutors, and courts in today's 4 cases did was apply the same analysis to each situation. What happened here is a crime, not a discipline matter, and the person who committed it will be held accountable in the criminal system rather than the school system alone. The Forsyth County District Attorney stood at a podium and said if you lay a hand on a teacher, you can expect swift and severe punishment. The Onondaga County District Attorney said school is supposed to be a safe place, and this will be taken very seriously. The Fort Lauderdale judge at the bond hearing said this man is a danger to the community. The Clark County Court sentenced a 16-year-old who pleaded guilty to attempted murder to 16 to 40 years in a state prison. 4 different sets of facts, 4 different jurisdictions. The same underlying determination that what happened in those classrooms and hallways had a name under the law, and that name had consequences. The teacher who was seated at her desk in Winston-Salem, when her glasses flew off, went to work the next day. The teacher in Syracuse whose nose was broken in front of 30 of her students is working in a different district and still going to medical appointments. The substitute teacher in Fort Lauderdale was at home recovering. The English teacher in Las Vegas uses a walker, has sensitivity to light and sound, and filed a lawsuit against the school district that did not tell her the student coming to talk about his grades had a counselor meeting requested for behavior concerns 2 weeks before he came to her door. They all went to work that day to teach. That is the job. Teach the students. Answer the questions. Unlock the door during office hours. The law in North Carolina and New York and Florida and Nevada says that the people who turn those ordinary moments into what you just heard about are not immune from the consequences of having done so. The cases are proceeding. The sentences are being served. Tell me in the comments which of today's 4 outcomes you think most closely match what the law should look like when a teacher is assaulted. New episode coming. See you in the next one.